Okay, I've got my Redcoat History shirt on. Let's get cracking.
Slow march!
Now, the American Revolution, the War of Independence, whatever you want to call it, it's a war I've only recently begun to research, but my gosh, it's fascinating. Yes, I know we lost, but there were many reasons for that. Luckily, there are many great historians striving to better understand and reassess the war. Men like my friend Robbie McNiven, who researched and co-wrote this episode. A big thanks to him. His Twitter page is linked in the description below. Now, one of the reasons this channel exists is to shed light on forgotten corners of military history and to bust as many myths as possible. Recently on this channel, we talked about one of the most common myths of the Revolution. Yep, the one that buckskin wearing American riflemen hiding behind trees were the key to American success. Well, guess what? They weren't.
What did I tell you fellas about shooting?
Aim small, miss small.
So what about the other side of the coin? What about those red-coated marksmen and their allies? Did you know that, yes, the British used rifles too in the war, sometimes to an even greater extent than the American revolutionaries themselves? Popular culture, of course, portrays the British redcoat as marching slowly forward in lines, armed with hopelessly inaccurate smoothbore muskets that they didn't know how to aim. Well, guess what? Pretty much all of that is untrue. Firstly, the inaccuracy of muskets has been exaggerated down the years. And secondly, British soldiers were very much trained to aim and practiced doing so, especially during wartime. But it's probably best if we save the details of all of that for another episode. Watch this space, let me know in the comments if that sounds good. Today we're focusing purely on the riflemen who fought, get this, for the British. As discussed in the previous video, the American colonists of the 18th century were famed for using rifles and for being expert marksmen. In fact, at the start of the Revolutionary War, the British feared rifles would give the rebels the vital edge. To combat them, the British Army actually instituted its own such weapon, the first ever service rifle. Now known as the contract rifles or the Pattern 1776, these weapons were based on the popular short-barreled rifles associated with hunters in the German states. The British government ordered 1,000 of these weapons to be produced in 1776 and to be distributed to their regiments in North America. Specifically, they were given to the best marksmen in British light infantry and dragoon units. This would give the redcoats the capacity to go toe-to-toe with enemy riflemen. While searching for more information about the rifle, I did come across this excellent YouTube video from Her Majesty's 40th Regiment of Foot. Check them out. Let's hear what they have to say about the weapon.
But the barrel is really where it comes into its own. One, as a rifle, it has sights, and this actually has a flip sight. So you have 3 different settings that you can use. It has an integral swivel rammer, unlike the kind of standard pipe rammer of the musket and the carbine. This one just pulls out and swivels over the barrel to drive the ball home. Keeps you from losing it. The barrel itself is held on by 3 keys rather than the pins, classic of British weapons. And the barrel is actually hinged, so if you put the rammer in the barrel and pull the pins out, you can swivel the barrel off, leaving the back end of the breech in place, which makes it much easier to clean and maintain.
So a quick break for some housekeeping, guys. If you want to sign up for my mailing list, get your monthly newsletter and a free copy of my ebook all about the Battle of Isandlwana, then please go over to redcoathistory.com/newsletter, fill out your details, and I'll send those over. Alternatively, you can join my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/redcoathistory. For $5 a month, you'll get early access to all of my films and podcasts, and you can join the debates that we have over there. The Pattern 1776 was a major development in the history of the British Army firearms, but ironically it's overshadowed by a far more short-lived but much more famous experiment, the breech-loading Ferguson rifle, which I bet you've heard of.
Just drop the ball in.
If you do a search on YouTube, you can find quite a few videos of the Ferguson being fired. I really enjoyed this one from the Folk Firearms Collective channel, highly recommended. Patrick Ferguson was a Scotsman and an officer in the British Army during the Revolutionary War. He was a bit of a stud, young, intelligent, talented. Remind you of anyone? I'm not that young. At the age of 26, he'd been experimenting with the creation of a flintlock weapon that not only possessed a rifled barrel, but could also be breech-loaded. This was a potentially major development, as the need to ram gunpowder, ball and cartridge paper down the barrel made up a good deal of the time involved in loading a regular musket. Being able, therefore, to insert the ammunition straight into the breech cut that time in half. This, combined with the weapon's accuracy, might make it seem like a technological breakthrough. But in reality, many conflicts have these so-called wonder weapons, tools of war that on paper cause people to question why they weren't mass-produced to create a decisive advantage. But looking at a weapon only in terms of rate of fire or accuracy does oversimplify things. Of course, there's a human factor. As they say, is it squaddy-proof? And also there's logistical factors such as ease of production. Now, of course, many people are quick to blame the British High Command, calling them hidebound and traditionalist, refusing to approve the mass production of the Ferguson rifle. But the truth is that it was simply too difficult and expensive to create such a weapon on a large scale in the 18th century. It also suffered from one of the same drawbacks that afflicted the American long rifle. It was too fragile and prone to damage. Ferguson, though, was given command of a company of light infantry equipped with his experimental rifle, but he was injured during the Battle of Brandywine and the unit was disbanded. In reality, while the Ferguson rifle was a fascinating experiment, it had much less of an impact on the future of British firearms than its less famous cousin, the Pattern 76. This weapon was stockier and more robust. You didn't need to worry about the screw lever mechanism and getting a good seal on the breech the way the Ferguson did. Now, the Pattern 1776 wasn't only used by red-coated regulars. American Loyalists were sometimes equipped with rifles, whether British made or otherwise. The Queen's Rangers, you've probably heard of them, generally considered the best Loyalist regiment during the war, included an entire rifle company. In fact, John Graves Simcoe, their commander, the man terribly misportrayed in the TV series Turn, by the way,
killing men in cold blood is hardly a leadership quality,
said of them in the aftermath of a retreat from Elizabethtown, the riflemen of the Queen's Rangers, now commanded by Sergeant Macpherson, were eminently distinguished on this retreat. The enemy militia who followed the army were kept by them at such a distance that very few shot reached the battalion, and they concealed themselves so admirably that none of them were wounded, whilst they scarcely returned a shot in vain. Riflemen could also be found among some Native American tribes who fought alongside the British. In fact, given how the number of riflemen in the Revolutionary Army fluctuated over the course of the conflict, it's likely that at times there were more rifle-armed troops fighting against the revolution than for it. And of course, we can't forget the force of sharpshooters that was considered to be amongst the most elite soldiers on either side. Yep, the Hessian Jägers. Now, you probably know Britain enlisted the help of 6 different Germanic states during the American Revolution. The largest contingent were from the region known as Hesse Kassel, I think that's how you say it, though there were also many from other German territories such as Waldeck or Brunswick. For simplicity's sake, we'll keep using the popular term Hessians to refer to all of them. Among those Hessian forces deployed to help the British in North America were the Jägers. Now, the word Jäger is German for hunter, and in a sense that's exactly what these men were. They first began to appear in the mid-18th century, especially during the 7 Years' War, when German states started using light infantry tactics in earnest. Gamekeepers, huntsmen, and those familiar with shooting and the outdoors were recruited to form light infantry companies able to skirmish and fight well in forested terrain. They were armed with rifles, the same short-barreled kind the British copied when developing the Pattern 76. Hesse, Kassel and a number of other states sent Jäger companies as part of the contingents deployed to North America. These green-jacketed forest-fighting marksmen rapidly acquired a reputation among friend and foe alike. A British officer called Henry Duncan wrote at the time, "Nothing could behave better than the Hessians, and particularly their Jägers or riflemen, who are much superior to those of the rebels as it's possible to imagine." And they were lethal and professional, performing a huge array of military tasks, from supporting foraging parties and acting as scouts and pickets to mounting raids and ambushes. They targeted enemy officers during combat, and of course they faced off against the revolutionary riflemen in duels of marksmanship. British General Charles Cornwallis stated, when asked by one Jäger captain whether he could pursue a group of fleeing revolutionaries, "Let them go and stay here. We do not want to lose any more men. One Jäger is worth 10 rebels." Jägers further enhanced the abilities of the British to combat the revolutionaries in their preferred terrain and often still come out on top. And while the cause of Congress eventually triumphed, it was more because of the Continental Army's growing experience in regular methods of warfare, as well, of course, as French and Spanish aid, rather than the superiority of their own riflemen that helped them win the war. For their part, the British didn't forget the rifles' service during the American Revolution. In 1800, the Experimental Corps of Riflemen was formed, a unit that would develop into the 95th Rifles. Armed with the Baker rifle, a weapon based on the older Pattern 7076, they became amongst the most renowned British regiments of the Napoleonic era. It's unlikely that would have been the case without the British rifles of the American Revolution.
Move your unit here now and give me some rolling fire from that fence. Go.
There was another regiment, of course, the 60th Royal American Rifles. They also fought in the peninsula and they've been covered on this channel before. If you want me to revisit them and to do more about them, let me know in the comments. In the meantime, YouTube thinks you're going to like this film that's on screen now. Give it a go, like, subscribe and comment, and I'll see you next week.